now we come to the next, the fireside chat about Beyond Borders collaborative journalism for shared challenges. And I'd like to call on stage Anushka Dalmia and Rajneesh Bandari. Please do come to stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to take a moment to pour some water. I traveled from Delhi this morning, so my throat is not doing super well, as you can imagine. Just a second, would you like some water as well? You're good? All right. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for sticking around at the end of almost at the end of the day and waiting for our session. My name is Anushka. I am a deputy editor at Asian Dispatch, which is a pan-Asia cross-border newsroom based out of Delhi. We operate under Data Leads, which I believe many of you might have worked with them in some capacity or the other. So ours is an investigative newsroom working under Data Leads. And we have 18 members in 10 countries across Asia. This is Rajneesh, my colleague. He's the editor of NIMJIN, Nepal Investigative Multimedia Journalism Network, and they are one of our members. Rajneesh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. It has been great being here. I thank you all for the great conference. And this is my first conference out here. And we are talking about collaboration. I think this is one of the best examples how collaboration could function. My name is Rajneesh Bandari. I lead NIMJIN. I've been a journalist for the last 20 years. I started as a television reporter, worked with international outlets for 7 years, and for the last 5 years I've been leading NIMJIN. It's Nepal Investigative Multimedia Journalism Network. We started during COVID-19 as a need to respond journalists who were reporting on COVID. We supported them during the COVID days. Some of the first journalists who had COVID, they're reporting from the hospitals. It was great. We were doing investigations and then looking for ways to collaborate. So it's great being here.
All right. So we're here to talk about a cross-border collaborative journalism. I feel like it's become a buzzword in the last few years. All of us have heard about it. But for many people, it's still an abstract concept because it's hard enough to collaborate within India where you have a new language, a new subculture, culture 100 kilometers away. And so just the idea of trying to do that even further away, even in more diverse cultures can seem daunting. And more than daunting, there's no funding for anything. So nobody wants to get into it. Nobody wants to try to figure out even more logistics, even more legal complications, etc. So when we established Asian Dispatch 2 years ago, this was one of the things we were trying to figure out is how do we eliminate all these logistical concerns for journalists and create an avenue whereby all of these different journalists from within Asia can come together and do some effective reporting, and they can focus on the reporting and we can create this medium, this node for them so that we take care of all of that stuff and people can just focus on reporting. As part of that, we met Rajneesh as well and his organization, and we've been doing quite a few collaborations in different capacities over the last 2 years. I want to start off by talking about one of our collaborations that came out this year, which was by our former editorial lead, Pallavi Pandir, and it was on the trading of shehtush, which is supposed to be the finest fabric in the world, and it's derived from the chiru, which is the Tibetan antelope, which is a severely endangered animal. We don't know how severely endangered at this point because that data is classified under the Chinese government. But the trade of shehtush has been banned for over 2 decades. However, it continues to this day through underground networks, etc. And so we wanted to track that trade, which starts off in Tibet with the poaching of the chiru, and then goes through trading routes in Nepal onto Kashmir, which is where the only people who know how to weave those shehtush shawls exist. From there into Pakistan, and then onto the Middle East, onto Europe, etc., for that shehtush to be sold. So we wanted to track those trading routes, and we reached out to Rajneesh's organization, Rajneesh in Nepal. We reached out to reporters in UAE, in Pakistan, etc., and did this kind of cross-border reporting on it. Rajneesh, would you like to talk about your experience working on that?
Sure. Like when we got this call from Pallavi, and then we decided that we'd definitely work on this story. So our part was to hold some few meetings. We had regular meetings as well, and then look at the Nepal side of the story. So we actually looked at the biggest seizures in Nepal, looked into the details, looked into proper investigation on what has been the result of these cases. Nobody has actually reported after the seizures were made. So it has been few years. So we looked into the court documents, went inside, and even the court officials were not sure what has actually happened, where this cases has gone. So from one court to another court to another court. So we really literally had to do the document trail of the story, of the whole cases, and then found the story. So and also looking at the people who actually made the seizure. So this was quite daunting. Talking to police officers who were actually leading the case, and also talking after a couple of years, sitting down with them. It was quite an interesting experience too. And we always love collaboration at NIMS, and not only with this Asian Dispatch, we have also worked with OCCRP, we have also worked with CIR Sri Lanka and other outlets to collaborate on stories. So I think for collaboration, the best thing was, so there was this objective of investigation on the shehtush. We had this. We also had a meeting with Mark, and he was our editorial guide as well. So we had a meeting with him, and then I think it came out well. And I think the best thing about collaboration is coming up, being open, being very transparent, and also putting your findings out there. So there's the word called the radical sharing, which we do not normally do in collaboration. Radical sharing means you come up with your investigation and you do share what the findings are, which is normally uncommon if we do investigations or if we share those things in Nepali context. Because I come from Nepal, and when we do collaborations, then there is a kind of hesitancy among media outlets, among journalists, to share those findings. They want to actually file the stories, and also file the stories before other publications. So this has been there. But with Asian Dispatch, we were in the same timeline. We were discussing. We were also making the publishing plans, and I think that's how we did it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, when we started doing this project and all of the other projects that we've been doing, the main key aspect of it was transparency for us. We wanted to make sure that whenever we work with any of our members, any reporter, any freelancer, anybody at all, we are very clear about where the money for this reporting comes from, how much budgeting we have. We want to make sure that just because somebody is a member or somebody is not, that doesn't mean that resources are not going to be shared. If we have allocated any amount of money for something, we try to be very clear about that. We try to make sure that we pay fairly, not just, and don't make the same mistakes that a lot of time, say Western newsrooms do, which is say, $400 in the local currency might be a lot versus to them, it's a small part of their budget. So we don't make those kinds of distinctions where we're like, we're gonna decide how much somebody is paid based on what they would get in their own countries. There's a lot of these conversations keep happening as we do these collaborations. And obviously it's not that our organization or any organization that's doing this is immune to mistakes, but the idea is not actually that radical, but people in this field think of it as radical, of being really open when talking about resources, of having those discussions early on. That's just so important, and that really builds a collaborative spirit for the long term. And that's really what's needed when we're living in such a fragmented sphere, and collaborative journalism is like one of the last strongholds that we have left. Rajneesh, I did have coming to this specific question that I had for you. I know that you've been working in investigative and collaborative journalism in different spheres for the last decade, basically. What has been your experience collaborating with, say, Western organizations or editors versus within South Asia, Southeast Asia, like both the negative and the positives of it?
I think that's a great question. So when one of the stories we did recently was with OSINT, organization, where we actually got details of 200 Nepalese were fighting in the Russian war, right? So it was all data from TikTok, and our job was to humanize the story, to look at these people who were going through it. So we got the details, we worked on our side, and we also collaborated on the findings, and then starting doing the project. So I think the first thing is to be very clear on what is the objective of the story. I think that has to be very clear, and we need to be very transparent, as you mentioned. Like, transparency is the key, and also be very open to listening to others. Like when we work with international outlets or the Western outlets, we have to be very upfront of saying that this is the objective, this is the finding, and this has how it should go, because sometimes editorially they may not like it, or something might happen as well. So we need to be very careful on those stands. So while working with Nepali outlet, or say within Nepal, so one of the challenges I face is when we're working with the mainstream media, the way where they have to report every day. The challenge is that because we do investigations, and sometimes we do investigations for even a year, right? We're very patient on getting out the story, getting out the evidence, getting out the documents, and everything that's required in investigative journalism. We follow the story inquiry method, building hypotheses, and all those things. But when we do with mainstream media, they're always they have to file the story. They're always they want to file it as soon as possible. So this has been a little bit difficult as well, and also getting the editorial thing right as well. Because we want to be fair with our reporting, and I think that the conversation on that editorial freedom is very much required, and we are very careful with that. And another thing is also the kind of setup that we have. For example, the Western outlets do have money. They have they have the wikis, they have the platforms to work on. But sometimes in Nepal, the outlets we work, they may not have. But it's not required that you need to have a big infrastructure or big money to do investigations. I think it's mostly important is to tell the story, to investigate the story, and to tell what's impacting the public. So we need to be on the common ground of telling this good story. It has to be evidence based, and also holding the powerful accountable. If we have these values put together, then I think it's important. And I know that the Western outlets do have money, but the Eastern outlets, they are looking for stories. I think that's quite important, and it has been fun collaborating with them, with both the scenarios, and mostly we want to collaborate with the South Asian outlets. We want to collaborate with the Asian outlets. We want to collaborate with the regional outlets in Nepal as well. So I think that this has been the key, and it has been very important for two regions. One is when we're investigating, if we collaborate, it minimizes the risk, which is quite important. If we are doing the story alone and single-handedly, I think it increases a lot of risk. But if we work collaboratively, it minimizes the risks. And another thing we need to be careful is also about the security, the security side of it. Like, are we using the right channel for communications? Are we encrypting the communications if we're doing investigations? So we use Signal for communications and, to communicate, and also use encrypted messaging apps as well. So I think these things are quite important to put in track. And the most important thing is also the risk assessment. It has to be done very properly. The risk assessment for all the stories we do, it has to be thoroughly done. And so it has been fun collaborating, yeah.
Absolutely. Just to add on to that a little bit, like talking about the cultural differences, I think, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, like, one of the things that I think Asian Dispatch as an all-female editorial team has realized in our collaborations within Asia, we've worked with a lot of freelancers, reporters in the Middle East, reporters in Central Asia, in Southeast Asia, in obviously South Asia as well. One of the main difficulties is that a lot of reporters aren't used to dealing with all female editorial teams or working under female editors and listening to their opinion over, say, what they might have to say. And I think that power dynamic is very different when freelancers work with Western newsrooms, and whether or not their editor is male, female, regardless of the gender. And so, yeah, that's just an important aspect of what we're talking about here. And navigating that has been definitely a challenge for us.
So how do you deal with these issues?
I think it's something that we're still figuring out. Mostly we end up complaining to each other post the call, because it's hard enough to find collaborators, it's hard enough to build that rapport sometimes, and so you don't want to, you want to try and work past those kinds of differences. But yeah, that's definitely.
But with us, I think it has been a great experience collaborating with Asian Dispatch, especially getting the stories, out in Asia. Like, because we do investigations in Nepal, it's basically like the focus is Nepal, but when the stories are out, like it has a huge impact, and especially the journalists who reported that they really like, because the story is featured on Asian Dispatch.
That's really good to know. What do you think about engaging with the different types of audiences for a cross-border story? Not just the Shahtush investigation, but any of these stories that we're doing, we're trying to reach audiences in Nepal, in India, in Bangladesh, etc. So what are some things that we should be keeping in mind when planning the outreach for a story?
That's really important. What's happening right now is we really need to regain that trust among audience, right? What's happening in Nepal is, I think it's happening everywhere, that we are losing trust among our audience, among the among the people who really believed in journalism. For example, 20 years back, I reported in Nepal when I was covering the protest, the April moment. Everyone was wavering at journalists. They were saying they were actually welcoming journalists who were covering the protest. And I recently covered the JNG protest recently in Kathmandu, and then there was so much of hatred on media. You can't actually go outside and say you're a media covering the protest. So this kind of trust is going down. So I think it's time that when we do stories, we do stories that people care about, that the public care about, and we really have to engage with them and understand them. So at NIMSIN, what we do is we do a kind of series of programs with students. These are young students, on the 12 grades or bachelors, and we try to understand them, where do you get the news from, right? Where do you get what's the source of news? And most of them said it's basically through social media. It's basically through social media pages. So I think it's really time that we really need to reformat how we engage with the audience, how we understand the audience, how we actually give service to them. I think journalism, or investigative journalism is basically for the public interest, right? Unless and until we understand the audience and what they are going through, what they're looking looking for, I think it's quite important. So we look at the need for this when we are doing the stories. Like for example, one of the investigations we recently did was about the level of iodine content in the packaged salt in Nepal. We did the investigation, it took for 6 months, and we found out that the level of iodine in the salt that's being used in Nepal is actually 3 or 4 times higher than the WHO standards. Even the doctors were mentioning that the pink salt is good for health. But we took the salt to the lab for investigation. We bought the salt from all the provinces in Nepal, and we found that there was, iodine content, the sodium in the pink salt as well. And we took it to the doctors and said, oh, I was giving the wrong recommendation for the last 40 years. That's what the doctors said. So I think it's quite important that we believe like what is important for the public, what is important for the people, and also like do the evidence-based journalism which is required, because for so long, there were reports, there were doctors who were recommending the pink salt is good, but we found the evidence that there is sodium, there is iodine in the pink salt as well. So I think this sort of like stories that people care, the audience care, is really important. And when we're doing collaborations, like it's not just a story that's important for the Nepali audience, but also the audience that's international, that's important. So for example, if we're doing collaboration between Sri Lanka and Nepal with the SJAI or Sri Lanka or Nepal, then what we look for is that both the angles should be there. Like this should be important for the Sri Lankan audience, this should be important for us as well. For example, when we did the OSINT thing with the Nepalese fighting in Russia or Ukraine, then like we really need to have this kind of like angles which are important for international audience and also for Nepali audience. And so I also answer, because like we both are journalists, so I want to ask a question to you as well. So because Asian Dispatch is more like a pan-Asia network, like all outlets doing, like how do you pick up stories that you want to collaborate? Because some stories are South Asian, some stories are Asian. So what are the criteria that you select for stories?
I mean, the criteria is really just, it goes back to the roots of journalism. You keep your eyes open, you keep a lookout on what is important to everybody, and that purview of what you're looking at just has expanded for us. But the other thing that we try to be very good about is to listen to all of our different members. When we started it out, we were trying to have like bigger meetings with all of the editors across these different countries, and then we realized that it's really just important to have them one-on-one, where people get more face time with you, talk to you, and talk about their ideas for what they want to do, and then to take the best ones, to take the ones that are most viable, and let's run with it. And that's kind of what we try to do. Before we start the Q&A, I just wanted to go through some basic tips and tricks. These are not revolutionary. A lot of you must be doing these already, but I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about some things we do for collaborative journalism. The number one most important thing is just being very organized. I know most of you are journalists and you are doing that already, but when you're working with different teams across different cultures, having those on hard paper, talking about those organizational methods is really important, and setting deadlines not just for the final delivery of a story, but for each step of a story and each collaborator, so that there is a lot of clarity about how you're going to proceed with the process. Delegating clear responsibilities, the most minute things you want to be clear about who exactly is responsible for delivering those and when. As I said, storyboard and design, not to leave it at the end, because how you're going to be presenting that story and who's going to be working on it, because these large-scale investigations, collaborations often need a lot of production time. Having that structure and skeleton prepared early on will mean that as you're working on the story, as your different reporters in 5 countries are on the ground, you are able to tell them exactly what you need, and they don't need to go back, because it's not possible in the same ways when it's a cross-border collaboration. And finally, like having editorials decided kind of early on, because if you're collaborating with different newsrooms, of course there's going to be differences in style, differences in approach. So figuring out what that hierarchy will look like before you get started on the project, having those harder conversations, but having them before doing your reporting, before signing it off. Another thing is communication is just so important, continuous communication. As journalists, we're all slammed all the time, I get that, but a quick response, just even if you can't do something, even if it's a delay, just having those responses done so that there is communication will make your collaborations easier, and it'll like build the structure for long-term collaborations. Another thing that I personally like to do is have multiple projects going on at once, because these things always take so much longer than you think they're going to. So just keeping different projects open so you never know what's going to work out when, that's just a really good idea. Drafting as you go instead of right at the end, which anybody who's done a long-form project or an investigative project knows, but in a cross-border project, it can become even more important so that your collaborators can kind of understand where you're at, the angles you're taking, and just be in on it with you in some capacity. And finally, throwing territorialism out the window, because you just cannot afford to be like that about a cross-border collaboration. You have to be open to people's ideas, even if they are different from yours, approaches that are different from yours, but just having that open mindset and seeing where that can lead the story, where that can lead your team. That's about it. I think Rajesh, if you want to add.
I think I'd just like to add two more things to this. I think the main thing, one thing I would like to is about the trust. I think it's really important, like how we bring that trust within the team, because we work from different regions, different countries, different places. So if there is no trust, the collaboration is not going to work. And to build that trust, it will take more time. Like you have to know that person, you have to work with that person in different capacities. You also need to have recommendations, because for example, Reporters Collective, us and Sri Lanka, we are trying to collaborate, do something South Asia, we're trying to build South Asia Collective. So I think we need to trust, to make these things happen. And what I see is within our country is, the level of trust is not that great. So we really need to bring that trust to do great stories. And another thing is that we also need inspiration, right? We really need people who could inspire that collaboration, people who could inspire that team to move ahead. So I think other things you mentioned, I totally agree, but I think if you just put two things, I think that would be great. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think if there's any questions, we're happy to answer them. Yes, please. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So, I have so far worked only on one collaborative piece, right? And it was a Pakistani journalist, and it was an India-Pakistan collaborative story on divided families, how the conflict between the two countries separates families who marry into both the countries, right? So I encountered a challenge while working. So the nomenclature around Kashmir is very fraught, right?
Yes.
It was the first time I became aware of how challenging it can be, because I was like Kashmir and POK, right, in India. And they use India-held Kashmir and Azad Kashmir. So initially we had a thing, because I was writing the pitch and I wrote POK, and the journalist got offended, call it POK. Okay, fine. At least at our level we sorted it out. Now it was a grant supported project, so we had to find a publisher. So in all my pitches I had written India administered Kashmir and Pakistan administered Kashmir, neutral terms, right? So, but then ultimately the piece was picked up by Pakistani media. And they use India-held Kashmir and Azad Kashmir, right? And on Twitter, I got attacked by trolls for being, Qatar, and that I should be hanged to death. So that was scary. But then I was wondering, because in my copy I had written India administered Kashmir and Pakistan. I made sure, but then it was changed, right? So I was like, how do you even communicate that with an editor? When you're, from a journalist perspective, when you're working on a collaborative story, and you hope that, the essence will be retained, but then it is getting published in a country where I don't know what the editorial norms are. So I just wanted to understand from the editor's perspective, how do you communicate these needs?
I mean, absolutely. And this question is as important as it is. I obviously cannot solve this for every editor that you're going to work with, etc. But I can just tell you how we dealt with the issue, which is we obviously went back and forth on this a lot. We spoke to our members in Pakistan as well, because they were going to be co-publishing the story with us, and so we wanted to make sure that we talk it out. And the reality of the situation was that we cannot write, even neutral terms at this point within India. If you're publishing, even neutral terms can get you into really, really legal trouble, even terms used by the BBC, etc. So we finally came to a solution is that we're going to use separate ways of addressing it. When the story is being published in Pakistan, by a Pakistani member, they can use the terms that they would like, and we can use the terms we would like. And we had editors note on each of the stories accompanying it, stating that the usage of the terms does not convey any opinion from our side, but it is just to adhere to the regulations set by respective governments. Yeah, like just transparency, that's all we could do, but I'm sure that that's going to be difficult work when you're working with an editor as a freelancer as opposed to, a team that's led by an editorial, team like Asian Dispatch. But thank you for bringing that up. Yes, Mang, please go ahead.
Challenges because especially in the South Asian context, it's a very, very political atmosphere.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is something we're constantly dealing with and trying to figure out how we want to do it. We've come up with solutions like, if it's a story about India, but we are too worried about reporting it, what if our Nepali member publishes it and we don't publish it, but it's still a collaboration, and vice versa, trying to do something like that. Again, just having conversations, trying to figure out if we can, old school journalism, sneak in something and hope to God that the government doesn't come after you for doing that. Those are the kinds of things. But I think one of the reasons we started this was to be able to navigate these challenges together rather than by ourselves and being like, so that's just really helpful. Having other people even sometimes empathize with you is just really nice. Yes.
Yeah, very similar to the questions that both of them asked. And it's a story that goes across the region. It's India-China stories that most times you don't have the data that you want from across the border. And then it's an imbalanced sort of collaboration happening. Or the storytelling is primarily from one end, and then you are trying to sneak in some stuff from the other end. The other question is about maps, the use of maps. How do you use maps in a cross-border story when every country has their own version of maps?
Yeah, I mean, the only context in which we had to deal with again is India-Pakistan till now, because in China, like we were not collaborating yet in China. We want to, but we haven't had to do that yet. With Pakistan again, thankfully, like when we were working out, when we were selecting our members, we just wanted to make sure that we work with editors who are on the same mindset of like, public interest journalism over national interests or, supposed national interests. So they understand that we are under some different regulations and they are under some different regulations, and this is not about personal opinion. So, while you're operating inside a particular geography, you follow the regulations that are imposed. That's about maps. And the first thing that you mentioned, I kind of forget. Could you repeat what you hear?
It's our story gets imbalanced when.
Oh, yes, the imbalance. I mean, I don't mean to sound like an advertisement, but like that's kind of what we do is, because we work with local members who operate specifically out of those countries, we always work with reporters from that region instead of doing it remotely. And so even if I can't find data on Sri Lanka from sitting here in Delhi, I have somebody there to go to the police station, ask them for that data, and work with us on that. Because I will do the same when they want information from India. So just being open to that kind of bootstrapping work for the other person, so then they can come and do that for you.
So we also use the GIJN network, the Global Investigative Journalism Network. They have the help desk. So if you need any information from any countries, you could just write to them, and then they will sort it out. And we do have OCCRP as well. We're a partner with them. So if something is happening, we need investigations on certain things from certain countries, then they are there to help. So I think this collaboration, that's why it's really important to have this network, like, larger networks, global network, Asian network, South Asian network, to collaborate, yeah.
Absolutely.
South Asia together accounts for about 1/4 of the total global population. Is there any good example of either of you story that is coming or you've published recently which talks about this whole region as a
We have done a few South Asia stories. There's a lot more in the works. Would you like to talk about some of it?
I think the Shatush story, like, yeah, some, like, it does cover the, you know, the chain and the region as well. And I think there are other stories, like recently you guys published as well. About,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So we don't publish any original reporting that is not cross-border in nature. So even if it's not, even if the hook is say in one story, we always make sure that it talks about the same situation in the mirroring stories. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to send you some links, man. I'm going to send you a long email after this.
And also, Mike, I think there is a really good need, you know, to do more cross-border collaborations within the South Asian region. And I think that there's a bigger need, like, because we have seen, like, how internationally, like, organizations are doing collaborations, like bringing, like, terabytes of data, putting 300 journalists together to work on a story for years. I think we need that in South Asia. We really need to work on these stories, yeah.
Absolutely. I think we can wrap up the session by just like the one idea that, like Rajneesh said, GIJN, OCCRP, Asian Dispatch, there's way more people sitting behind these desks and emails that really want to collaborate, that want to participate in a radical idea that you might have. So just reaching out to as many people as you can and just see like if they can work with you on this, if they can help you out, if they can direct you to someone else. You know, just going for it. Nobody really minds an email. So, yeah, just going with that.
This is one question.
Oh, sure. Go for it.
Very quickly, I think Ganesh, you mentioned sort of risk assessment before you do a story. So could you tell us a little bit about that? Because, you know, as freelancers, we have to take that call. So I was wondering what the process was.
I think that's a great question. So at Nimzin, we do have a risk assessment for all the stories we do. Even we work with freelancers, we do the risk assessment. So risk assessment is a process of taking you through the whole, you know, the steps where what sort of risks you might face. Like we could talk, you know, after the session as well. Like I can share in more details, but like just make sure that when you're doing this story, you're not putting yourself at risk. Like we try to minimize the risks as much as possible because at the end, like you have to be very safe when you are doing a story, and when you are doing investigations, there are many challenges and risks that could be involved. So we take you through the whole process to you know try to navigate the risks and also provide solutions on how to report it safely.
All right. Thank you so much, guys, for listening in. Thanks. I hope that was cool.